Welcome to The Whole Pineapple. I'm Ruby Boris.
And I'm Ann Judge. The Whole Pineapple is a podcast about wellness focused around fertility. And on these weekly mini episodes, we bring you bite-sized ideas for you to snack on.
Like breathing exercises, book reviews. Maybe we'll review some scientific research, or we'll share some wellness and fertility stories from our listeners.
So if you're looking for a tip or a trick related to your fertility and well-being, then you've come to the right place.
Let's dig in.
Well, welcome back to our snack episode. We are so pleased to welcome back Jaimie Kelton, a podcast host and co-creator of If These Ovaries Could Talk, the Queer Families podcast. Hopefully you checked out her full episode, but she's gracious enough to come back and give a little short snack where we talk a little bit more about one of the topics we covered in the main episode.
This little mini episode, I thought we could talk about being out as a family. We talked a little bit about it in the bigger episode, but I thought it would be kind of a fun little standalone to talk about the issues and the difficulties and also just the joy of being out as a family.
You know, when once you have these kids, you have to work through your internalized homophobia, if you still have it, which many of us still have some shame over the fact that we are queer. It's in there and it's hard to get rid of. But when you have the kids, you have to model pride in your family no matter what, because you don't want your kids to have any baggage over the fact that they have LGBTQ parents. You don't want them to feel anything. You want your kids to be happy and well-adjusted. So we work really hard to, like I used to whisper the word lesbian, like when I was out and about, and she's a lesbian. And if you pay attention when people talk. So many people whisper that word. It's kind of amazing when you really step back and pay attention to that. So I started, after we had the kids, I said, you know what? Nope, I have to say that word. I have to say it loud and proud. And sometimes people, I see it in their faces, they get uncomfortable when I say I'm a lesbian, I'm a proud lesbian. And my kids say lesbian now too. And I'm trying to just model pride in everything that has to do with our LGBTQ family. And it's just funny. We all have that story when our kids have been hearing it so much that it's just part of their conversation. So they tell random people crazy stuff. Like there was this one time, I think it's in my book, we were in a cab with our daughter who was 3 at the time. And our daughter started pointing to men at that point in her life and saying, "That's my dad. That's my dad. That's my dad." And we every time, "No, honey, you don't have a dad. You have a donor. He's not your dad. You have 2 moms." You constantly say this. And so then she was we were in this cab with this guy that I don't think has been around a lot of LGBTQ folks, and she just kept, "He's my dad. That's my dad. He's my dad." And we were and we kept saying over, "No, you don't have a dad, you have 2 moms. You have 2 moms. You have," and I think this man was he wanted to get us out of his cab so bad. And then she was "Okay, well, he's a pig. He's a pig." And we're no, you're not a pig, sir. You're not a pig. She actually really loves pigs. That's a compliment in her mind. But it was we couldn't get out of that cab fast enough. And we've heard other people's stories with the same kind of thing where the kids just kind of, they just out you because they have no issues about it, and they out you everywhere. There's one more funny story. My daughter was, I guess, about 6 or 7, and we were in a waiting room somewhere, and we were sitting next to this older lady, and she looked at both of us, this lady, and she said, "Oh my God, if you're not the mirror image of each other." And my daughter and I had this look, we looked at each other, and she goes, I would just leave it be because this is an older woman who, I don't want to make her feel uncomfortable. And, because we're not genetically related. But my daughter knows. So my daughter goes, "That's so funny that you would say that because she didn't even born me."
She didn't even born me.
And it was it's just you got it. And you have to go with it. I cannot omit, before you have kids, I'll use the cab scenario again. When you're in a cab and the cab driver asks you about your boyfriend, you can choose. I could choose if I wanted to out myself in that moment or just let him believe I had a boyfriend and just end the conversation. But when my kids are there, I have to say, "No, I don't have a boyfriend. I have a wife." they have two moms, you know, so they hear it, so that they don't see me letting someone. Basically, they don't see me lie about my life or hide.
Yeah.
I don't want them to see me hide.
One was something I hadn't thought about as much before until reading your book. I can't remember which of you shared the story, but that how every time you check into a hotel, they would try to say, oh, do you want separate beds instead of what? And yeah, it's like this fact that you're always having to make those little decisions. How much do I need to tell this random person?
The outing
but
really never ends. It really never ends. Maybe some people, it's just assumed. It's not assumed for me and my wife that we are a married couple. And so we're constantly outing ourselves. It gets exhausting. It's like, oh God, I don't want to, but my kids are here, so I have to. You know, I don't need to tell this person I'm a lesbian, but I have to now because my kids are watching.
They watch everything. So. They're definitely watching everything.
Yeah. So there is a responsibility there, a huge responsibility.
And you mentioned in our full episode that, you know, your daughter has talked more about, you know, understanding donor and the sibling registry. Like, you know, were you surprised by any of the questions that she had? I know you've been planting these seeds throughout her life, but what else besides those random comments? Did she ask something that you'd never thought about before?
No, she hasn't asked anything that was shocking.
Yeah.
She's recently actually... She started, but I think every kid asks these questions. She's been starting to ask about sex and kissing and things like that. And that has been like, oh my God, that's a lot. And I'm trying to do it by being inclusive and make sure we're talking about all of the genders. And so I've had to find these inclusive, newer books about sex for kids. And that's been a journey. And they're very descriptive.
Interesting for a lot of us that work in the clinic and have kids. Like, I think we all have a funny story about it was easier to talk about it the scientific, like sperm and eggs and this and that, and then having to talk about sex. Multiple of us have had kids being like, ew, I don't want to do that. I'll just do IVF the way you told me. I'll just let them put egg and sperm together in a dish. That seems like the way for me.
Yeah. It's so funny. These difficult conversations never end when you're a parent. It's true.
Kids are so great though, because they're like a blank slate, and so they don't have these like a societal bias, you know, already ingrained in them. We've had conversations about being trans and what that means, and things like that. And when we've come in those situations where we're meeting somebody who's trans, and we'll say like, okay, their pronouns are she, her, and they're like, oh yeah, okay, hi. Like they totally get it. Totally
they go with it.
Yeah.
They go with it. Yeah, I love kids. Kids are the best. They just go with it. They don't have all that crazy crap that we all have in our heads.
They're just like, oh yeah, that's cool. That's cool.
I follow this really cool person called, their handle is the Jeffrey Marsh, and non-binary, just like beautiful. Then talks about inclusivity and love and what real allyship looks like and what real love looks like. And like if it's like the modern day Mr. Rogers, except you can't say Mr. Rogers because it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit at all.
No,
we need another term, but they're like, I want them to be the new Rogers, you know, because it's just beautiful what this person preaches and embodies. I love, go follow the Jeffrey Marsh. Love, so much love.
That's so great.
And other resources that, you know, I know in the book you mentioned a few other kids' books. Like, what other things have you found really helpful for just either your children or in the general community to be able to have, you know, from a very early age, really good open conversations?
Books, children's books, and there's a lot of them. And on our Instagram page, actually, we have a saved story where I kind of just like showed every LGBTQ friendly book that we have in my kids' library. There's like 20 of them, I think. And that's helpful because it helps to have a book to have these conversations. It helps to just read the book. It helps that they see that there is a character in a book that just happens to have two moms. That the moral of the story is not that the kid has two moms. That's just it. They just happen to have two moms. That's always nice to see. It's refreshing.
Yeah.
And so it just helps to have books to read to your kids.
Representation matters for those kiddos too. Yeah, one of my kids' favorite books, my brother got it for them, and they are just obsessed. They love it so much. It's called Auntie, Uncle, Drag Queen Hero.
Oh, I don't know that one.
It's good. It's good. they go by Auntie Uncle, and Auntie Uncle during their Pride Parade rescues a dog and gets a medal basically from the city, and it's very cute, and I love it, and the illustrations are adorable. So
yeah, I gotta find that.
Yeah,
for sure.
Well, and it's also hard to see, I mean, I don't want to get too much of a downer, but just like how upset people get with even small amounts of representation. Like I remember when Finding Dory came out and there's just that one brief scene of like two women with a baby in a stroller and everyone's all
Everybody
like
gets
Pixar's first gay family. It's like that wasn't even necessary. I mean, it's like just even a small glimpse of two people with a stroller.
Because we're pushing our gay agenda on everyone. And we're going to turn everyone gay. If that were the case, and I'm sure you've seen this written many times, if that were the case, then we'd all be straight because all we see is the straight agenda everywhere we look.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm not straight. So it didn't make me straight. So you seeing two women together is not going to make your children gay. Don't worry. Don't worry.
And the whole, it's a lifestyle thing. It's like, you really think people would choose to have all this discrimination? No, just let people be people. Just stop. Stop. And say the word gay, business. Please. Just come on.
We say gay all day. Say gay. Gay. Yeah. No, it really is. And the attacks on the queer community right now are just insane. And the trans community, I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Let's stop the hate, please.
I know. It's we have had a lot of things happen the last 6 months or so.
Yeah. And it's unsettling and
it
sad.
It is. Yeah.
People feel the need to attack marginalized folks. It's
I know.
Mind your business.
Right.
We're just over here being happy and gay.
Just let people be happy and gay, okay?
Yeah. So
good.
Well, in reading your book, too, I appreciated the chapter on the non-biological parent and what that experience is like and the challenges in that, especially, as you mentioned, if you're just the two of you, is there... all the unique issues that come up there in terms of how much genetics really matters and does it. And that's something that I think a lot of our listeners who build their family with donor egg or donor sperm, who it hadn't been their original intention, really struggle with too. Because if you use an egg donor, that's something where historically a lot of people used to keep secret. And we really are moving now more towards that openness because, again, there's genetic testing, there are things in the future, and you don't want children to feel like any part of their identity is a surprise. You want it to just be kind of part of their story. But it is such a tough thing to struggle with.
Well, we've recently connected with the Donor Conception Network, and there are a lot of different donor conception groups who feel very strongly and have a lot of pain over the fact that they were donor conceived. And across the board, what they all say is that they felt like they were lied to because they were not told at an early age. So that is not the right way to go about it.
Right.
In our queer families, it's a little bit easier for us to be upfront from the start because we kind of have to, because it's obvious.
Yeah.
And so I think we're a little bit lucky in that respect. But in terms of the non-bio, being the non-bio parent, I am a non-bio and a bio parent to my kids. And I had a really hard time I struggled with being a non-bio parent because I never saw that in my future. And when my wife decided that she wanted to carry two, I had to quickly wrestle in my brain about, okay, how am I going to handle this? That was never my dream. That wasn't what I wanted. I want to be biologically connected to my children. It sounds so selfish, but you know what? It's okay. It's okay to be selfish because you have your dream and you're allowed to mourn when it doesn't work out. And I'm not alone in having hard feelings over not having a biological connection to one of my kids. Some folks are totally fine. It doesn't matter to them at all. Some of us have to really work through some stuff to get over the fact that we're not connected. Like I just interviewed my new guest host who's coming in, E. They had such a hard time with not being biologically connected that they ended up getting a divorce.
Oh, wow.
Shortly after the baby was born. They're still in the life. They co-parent, but it was so hard for E that they ended up really resenting their spouse. And it led to a divorce. So those are deep feelings and they're real feelings. Mm-hmm. And if you need to get help for those feelings you're having, get help because you do need to work through that stuff. You do.
And especially, I mean, kids pick up on things too.
Yes.
So like if they see that there's some sort of, that you're struggling with something, the last thing you want is for them to feel like they're the cause of stress or angst for you, because that's not where it's coming from either.
No, it's like, for me, it was fear. It was fear that I wasn't going to connect as well as my wife was going to, because she had a biological connection. That's not the case. That's not what happened. But I was very, very scared. And I think that that's where most of my feelings stem from. Yeah. It's all sunshine and rainbows now. I mean, not really, but like I have no issues, not being biologically connected with my daughter now. But it was scary for a while.
Yeah. And that comes up a lot, especially if we're doing fertility treatment. If you're going through the fertility process, I've had couples where it just didn't, we're trying with one partner and it's just not working. And so they have to make a decision, like maybe let's try the other partner's eggs. And that's really hard. It's trying to make that decision because it completely changes the plan. And sometimes it's inaudible. Throws a wrench in things.
Yeah. And that's what we have to do. We have to be willing to change the plan and deal with the emotions that come with that. But you're going to have to change your plan at least once. It's inevitable. I mean, I don't know. Maybe you're lucky and you don't, and the plan works out, but that's rare.
So being open and honest with your kids, it sounds like that's a really important thing from the beginning. I loved that in our larger episode, Planting the Seed. Is there anything else that you can share, any words of wisdom for how to be a queer family out in the world?
I don't know. You do you, boo. Just be you. Be you and be, and love yourselves and love your family and model pride and congrats, you made a family.
Oh, I love that. Yes.
And I feel like so many things in society, like we're kind of counting on our kids to do better, and I feel like you see this young generation that are just so much more out and open and proud of who they are. And I feel like that's going to just hopefully continue to push society to eventually catch up.
I hope so too.
Yeah, I talked to a teacher recently who's like, I am seeing it. I am seeing it in the kids that they're just much more receptive to people that are different than them and accepting and loving and, loving themselves even too. So that's so great. Yeah.
Let's keep that going.
Yes. Yeah. Let's keep the momentum moving in positivity and love. The world always needs more love.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you for joining us and celebrating Pride with us.
Yeah, happy Pride.
Thanks for joining us for this week's episode of the Whole Pineapple Podcast. We hope it was helpful.
If you know someone who could benefit from hearing the podcast, we hope you'll share it with them.
And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review The Whole Pineapple on your favorite podcast app. Every rating and review makes us easier to find.
This podcast is sponsored by Seattle Reproductive Medicine and is produced by Audiotocracy Podcast Production. We'll see you next time. Have a delicious week.